The Summer Games Minute, brought to you by Mass Mutual. For most professional athletes, versatility means they can play a few different positions in a single sport. For Babe Dietrichson-Zaharias, versatility means dominance across the entire spectrum of sport. In the 1932 Summer Games in Los Angeles, Zaharias won gold in the 80-meter hurdles and the javelin throw, plus she got a silver in the high jump. Running, throwing, jumping wasn't enough for Babe, so she became a competitive billiards player, then jumped into professional golf, winning 10 major championships, all the while making a few pitching appearances in Major League Baseball spring training games. Mass Mutual understands the nuances in how women want and need to manage their finances. With quality product solutions and guidance, a Mass Mutual financial professional can help you plan for both short-term and long-term money goals. Learn more and get started at massmutual.com.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. With the price of just about everything going up during inflation, we thought we'd bring our prices down. So to help us, we brought in a reverse auctioneer, which is apparently a thing.
Mint Mobile Unlimited Premium Wireless. How to get 30, 30, bit to get 30, bit to get 20, 20, 20, bit to get 20, 20, bit to get 15, 15, 15, 15, just $15 a month? Sold!
Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 up front for 3 months plus taxes and fees. Promo rate for new customers for limited time. Unlimited more than 40 gigabytes per month. Slows full terms at mintmobile.com.
When you need mealtime inspiration, it's worth shopping Kroger, where you'll find over 30,000 mouth-watering choices that excite your inner foodie. And no matter what tasty choice you make, you'll enjoy our everyday low prices, plus extra ways to save, like digital coupons worth over $600 each week. You can also save up to $1 off per gallon at the pump with fuel points. More savings and more inspiring flavors make shopping Kroger worth it every time. Kroger, fresh for everyone. Fuel restrictions apply.
The Athletic.
We asked you for your suggestions for how to improve MotoGP, and oh my goodness, you have got a lot of ideas. We've never had a response like this on the Race MotoGP podcast when we've called out for your questions and input. We've got a lot to get through, and we haven't. Well, we scratched the surface of what you've sent, but I'm afraid we're not going to get through everybody's. This was an amazing response. Thank you so much, listeners. It comes across saying that like there's loads wrong with MotoGP and loads that you want to fix. Actually, you've just got a lot of ideas. I think everyone is loving MotoGP as much as we are at the moment, and we just want to make it even better than it is now. So I'm Matt Beard. Joining me to answer your questions? Not really this time. To talk about your suggestions and give our takes on them are Val Khorounzhiy and Simon Patterson, and potentially Alex Rins and Joan Mir if they come past, because wherever Simon is in Andorra at the moment, he's got the former Suzuki MotoGP lineup hanging around somewhere with him.
If one of them happens to wander by, we will absolutely ask them what their suggestion is for making MotoGP better.
I think asking a Yamaha and Honda rider that right now as well will be particularly.
Put me on a Ducati and then magically it's the most popular sport in the world right away.
Yeah, more concessions which consist of banning Ducati.
Let's get straight to it, as we've got so many we want to get through today. We're going to start with Phil from sunny North Wales, who sent this suggestion by email voice note.
Hi guys, it's Phil here from sunny North Wales. I volunteer as a marshal with the British Superbike Series, as well as covering British Rounds, World Superbikes, MotoGP. And I think, going back to Val's point about safety, there is a rule in BSB that we do not have in MotoGP that I think would be a big benefit, and it's a simple one that in a race, if your bike touches the ground, that's it, your race is done. Initially, I think that was brought in to stop track contamination because of incidents where there was oil and fluids on the track causing other people to crash after people had remounted. But one thing that doesn't get talked about enough is the opportunity for riders to sustain concussions. It's something I don't think the motorbike racing community takes as serious as maybe it could at times. And I definitely think adding that rule to MotoGP would be a big benefit. So interested to see what you guys would think, and keep up the great work with the pod. Thank you.
So, Simon and Val, you're both up for talking about this one. Simon, I think you follow British Superbikes by far the closest out of us. So based on your experience of how that rule works in that series, what do you think of this?
I mean, I think I've wrote articles before on the website advocating for MotoGP to bring this in because it just makes so much sense to me. I don't think that there's any real benefit that we see from people remounting and coming back into races, and scoring like meaningful results. But by doing so, they create a huge hazard to themselves and others because they're riding a motorbike that essentially has been crashed and hasn't been past fit to race when they do so. We've seen all sorts of disasters over the year caused because of it. I mean, the two that stand out to me is, I remember Sam Lowes had a huge crash at the Red Bull Ring in Moto2 a few years ago because his front brake lever snapped off when he tried to brake because he'd already crashed and damaged it. And then, of course, do you remember the Moto3 crash in Le Mans a few years ago where 17 riders went down because someone had spilled oil things like that happen because of people remounting on broken bikes. The BSB rule was brought in specifically because they basically lost an entire race weekend because someone crashed on Sunday morning in the wet, put a hole in the side of the casing, got back on, rode the bike back and put down a ring of oil around the entire circuit. And the track was basically rendered unrideable. It's a very sane safety rule, I think. I don't see any real benefit in terms of, amazing results from people riding back from the gravel trap. It just seems like a sensible thing for me to bring in.
I mean, we've seen guys like Mark specifically recover points that are at least championship meaningful from a position of crashing. And, I mean, there was the one ride I think back to is Paul Espargaro on the KTM in a wet Valencia race where he crashed and there was a red flag. It was a weird rain race, and in the end it ended up being his first podium, I think, in the project's first podium. But that's a rare outcome. It's a very cool, nice story, but I'm not sure that's the kind of thing that should determine whether or not that kind of rule is in place. And MotoGP with its 22 runners is never short of bikes on track. For me, I see the appeal of if you're down, you're down. So if you're down, you're out. I don't feel too strongly about it, I guess. It's because we've on my watch have not yet seen like a true proper disaster from somebody trying to wheel a bent, broken bike around. But I mean, I'd probably just do it. Yeah, I'd probably just implement it. I don't love the idea of riders remounting damaged bikes too much or rushing back out on track after having crashed. Although, again, if we had that rule in place, then that Moto3 moment of the rider trying to get the wrong bike, the bike of his previous team, was it Ivan Ortola, was it a few weekends ago? That wouldn't have happened, and maybe that's worth it. Maybe that's it's worth the price of admission.
One thing I should say is that whenever this was brought in BSB, there was like the inevitable outrage that you get sometimes when you mention it in MotoGP as well. But it lasted like one weekend, and then people realised that actually it's not such a bad thing. And basically since then, there's never been any real controversy about it in BSB. They've been doing it for years without much in the way of drama. So, it's not like this is a completely left field suggestion like some of the things we're going to get to further down the list. This is a fairly sensible sane rule that's been well tested in other series and produces fairly obvious safety benefits.
When I heard this voice note from Phil, I was a little bit a little bit anti, but I felt morally wrong for doing so because I do like some of the kind of storylines and drama that come from the efforts of the visuals of a rider sprinting to get their bike and heroically remounting. It does contribute points sometimes that do make a difference. Probably, if you do it statistically, the times it's contributed interesting drama versus the time it's screwed up everyone else's races and left debris and oil everywhere or let someone carry on with an injury, probably it's more to the negative than positive. And I think in 10 years' time, if this rule was implemented, we'd all look back and go, why wasn't this always a rule? But yeah, so I think, Phil, you're on the morally and practically right side of things with this, even if a little part of me is like, oh, I do quite like watching that remounting sprint happen. Let's move on to Scott Jones from Oregon, who goes on a fantastic email rant about yellow flags in qualifying and the fact that now, in a situation where riders are kind of saving up their most important laps for the last few minutes and lap times get deleted when yellow flags come out, you could have a a kind of horror show situation. The way Scott outlines it is, in the last 3 minutes, 4 riders on track are putting in potentially the 4 fastest laps of the qualifying session. A rider half a lap ahead crashes, resulting in yellow flags, and all those fast laps are disallowed. And adding insult to injury, the time it takes to clear the incident is essentially subtracted from the 15-minute session because the yellows are out for that time. It's nonsense, says Scott. And he says, well, I realise a tight schedule is in play. They need to extend the session by approximately the same amount of time that was subtracted for the yellows, or just add 2 minutes, giving the riders who are victimised the opportunity to get 2 more laps in. So it's basically guaranteeing that riders do get 15 clear minutes in qualifying to produce their fastest laps. Val, you wanted to comment on this one. What do you reckon?
Yeah, because, we do see that sometimes in four-wheeled racing. I think generally across racing, the rule is the session time is the session time, and whatever happens, that's the session time, and it doesn't get extended. I think we've seen it in American open-wheel racing IndyCar. They'll sometimes just give an extra lap at the end of the session when they feel like, oh, nobody got the lap in, so it would be only fair. I don't know. I mean, it's kind of a complicated one, because I see there is little sporting value or sporting enjoyment in just having a grid set by whoever got the lap in, right? Whoever got a clean piece of track, whoever avoided a badly timed yellow flag sector. And obviously the yellow flag rule deleting lap times for me is totally the correct one and should be stricter. So ideally you would want to then give riders an out. But also I don't mind too much. I don't know. So, there's a lot of time in Q2. If it's a real concern, run in the gap, run when there's nobody on track. It's how racing deals with it, just generally, right? Just it's part of the tactic, part of the strategy for the track. I mean, the payoff of running behind somebody is a better lap time, but the risk is that you get caught up in their yellow flags. If we're not gonna just either we just stage manage completely when all the riders run, and I'd be fine with that, would not bother me. But either we do that, or we just let the session play out how it plays out in 15 minutes, and when the flag's out, the flag's out. And if you didn't get a clean lap in, well, c'est la vie. But I see why it's annoying, certainly.
The thing is, to me there, you need one fast lap. You've got 15 minutes. I get track evolution and stuff, but now that this yellow flag lap deletion is in place and riders are getting used to it, get a banker in. Just change your strategy so you are making sure you've got a lap time in early just in case. And then the chances of a massive yellow flag deletion wrecking everyone's session do diminish, because you're not trying to do it all in 2 minutes at the end.
And also, for me, also the problem is then you restart and somebody goes down again. Do you restart again? Somebody goes down again. Do you restart again? The tires are not unlimited. Everybody's time is not unlimited. Yeah.
I mean, I'm totally in agreement with you, Val. It's part of playing the game, right? If the session was 5 minutes long and you had the chance to do one lap, then maybe it's different. But it's 15 minutes. You've got a chance to put in a banker early on. You've got the opportunity to go out and do a fast lap. The problem with extending the time, for me more than anything else, is that tyres will do a finite amount of laps. And it doesn't matter whether that's cruising or at race speed. You lose performance every lap you do on a soft tyre. So, it's not going to be as fast, it's not going to be as competitive, it's going to be more dangerous because people are going to be in tyres that have cooled down a bit whenever they suddenly have to push again, whenever they get a green flag, something like that. I'm not a huge fan of it. And one thing I will say, just to nitpick, sorry Scott, is that I don't think that anyone who loses their lap time because they went fast under a yellow flag is being victimised. I think that they get away lucky, and that people who do fast lap times under yellow flags should be excluded from the session and sent to the back of the grid, because the only people being victimised is the marshals that they're inevitably going to end up throwing a motorbike at if they crash, who are in the gravel trap dealing with the previous incident. So I don't think there's no victims on track because of that.
I'm going to say that the victim, where Scott, I'm guessing, is thinking the victimisation is happening there, is those riders who haven't crashed are losing the chance to set a fast time.
Yeah.
Because someone else has brought out yellows rather than that they've disregarded the yellows. But I do see your point that yellow flags are there for a reason.
Yeah.
There is a recent example. I mean, Enea Bastianini at Le Mans caught a yellow flag, didn't finish that lap, it wasn't a fast lap, so he obeyed the rules. As far as lifetime went, that changed his grid position from, I think, third or fourth, to 9th.
Yeah.
Wrecked his weekend. Entirely possible he does, well, not the double probably, but he wins the Grand Prix from 4th on the grid. So it could potentially materially change where that guy's going to ride in 2025. So I totally get it, but it's just, for me, it's just part of the game.
To which I'll just conclude that point by saying Marc Marquez started 13th for both those races. On to Phil Gaze, who by email suggests this change for 2027. And I think we might say, Phil, forget 2027. Can we have this for like June 2024? Because this is good. A comprehensive racing rulebook for rider conduct, complete with infraction penalties and with interpretations, to be developed in conjunction with the MotoGP Riders Union. Well, we need that to exist first, so maybe not next month. And Phil says existing examples for reference from elsewhere in sport are the racing rules of sailing and hockey playing rules. I'm not familiar with either of those, but this idea of just let's have an accessible rulebook that lays out some scenarios, it makes sense on paper. Simon, go for it.
The problem is that I don't think the stewards or the riders want hard and fast yes and no rules, because they always want there to be able to be a bit of interpretation, which makes it difficult. But you know, I would like, and I do agree with what Phil says, that we should have. I would like to see like a comprehensive list of, this is the penalty, this is the next stage of the penalty, this is the third stage of the penalty, so that it works up a ranking system, so that we know whenever someone does something that they're going to be penalised for it. We know what the penalty is going to be, roughly, and we know that the penalty is going to be worse this time than it was the last time because they've already done it before. We had this, not a MotoGP example, but a Moto3 incident example where someone got a double long... Adrian Fernandez got a double long lap penalty in Le Mans for riding slowly during qualifying, which is his fourth of the year, I think, his fourth penalty of the year for that offence. And it escalated from one long lap to two long laps. It escalated from a warning to one long lap to two long laps. But then his fourth offence was a second double long lap, because we hadn't been given a list that said, oh yeah, the penalty for offence 3 is the same as offence 4. And we don't know what the penalty is going to be for offence 5 whenever he inevitably does it again, because he's already done 4 times in 5 races, so he's going to. It's difficult. It would be nice to be able to predict at least that bit of the steward's behaviour, even if we're not really able to predict the majority of the rest of their behaviour.
Whenever we've discussed this kind of thing before, I've still had this nagging doubt that the nature of incidents involves too much subjectivity and too many vehicle physics nuances, that to be able to put it down on paper and go, this is definitely what you do in this situation. This is definitely, if your wheels are here and the other rider's wheels are here, therefore you're the person who gets the penalty. I don't know if the laws of physics and the vagaries of rider conduct can ever come together enough to give a clear, here's what you should do. But again, I'm not familiar with the racing rules of sailing or the hockey playing rules, and I'd imagine the same problems apply to what you do with a boat and what you do with a hockey stick, really. So I guess maybe that if that is proved possible in other sports, then we should have certainly there has to be a better situation than what's going on with stewards now, because I have to say, when we're going through the massive list of submissions we had for this podcast, there were quite a few I just put on the standby pile, because they were all just basically saying, we agree with you about stewarding, please just make stewarding better. There was a heavy listener waiting towards going, something needs to be different about how these championships are stewarded at the moment. So yeah, maybe MotoGP needs to try its own equivalent of the racing rules of sailing and at least give that a go, make it clearly accessible to everyone, so we've got something more concrete to work with.
You know we love talking stats here at The Athletic. Here's one that's super simple to remember. Discover automatically doubles the cash back you've earned on your credit card at the end of your first year with Cashback Match. That means with Discover, you could turn $150 cash back to $300. That's right, you could put it towards some memorabilia you've had your eye on, or treat yourself to a premium sports network. You earn, and Discover doubles. See terms at discover.com/creditcard.
We'll get back to the pod in a moment, but first of all, let me tell you about Grammarly. Email, Google Docs, Slack, you write across multiple platforms and places during your workday, so delivering consistent, high-quality communication everywhere is key. Grammarly is an AI writing partner that helps you get work done faster with high-quality writing for better projects, proposals, presentations, and more. Best of all, Grammarly works where you work, so you can get more done no matter what tools you use. As a journalist and podcast host, I'm constantly writing and rewriting copy and drawing up scripts. It's part of the job, and Grammarly helps make it faster. It's got some really cool features like tone suggestions to help you strike the right balance between direct and friendly in work emails. Plus, Grammarly has a ton of other great features like advanced spelling, grammar, punctuation, and conciseness suggestions to ensure your writing is professional, mistake-free, and clear. Get AI writing support that works where you work. Sign up and download for free at grammarly.com/podcast. That's GRAMMARLY.com/podcast. Easier said, done.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. With the price of just about everything going up during inflation, we thought we'd bring our prices down. So to help us, we brought in a reverse auctioneer, which is apparently a thing.
Mint Mobile Unlimited Premium Wireless. How to get 30, 30, bit to get 30, bit to get 20, 20, 20, bit to get 20, 20, bit to get 15, 15, 15, 15, just $15 a month? Sold!
Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 up front for 3 months plus taxes and fees. Promo rate for new customers for limited time. Unlimited more than 40 gigabytes per month. Slows full terms at mintmobile.com.
Okay, heading into technical rules now. Andrew Horton emailed saying, hello chaps, I'm going to read all of Andrew's email because he goes through a kind of philosophical technical point and then gets to a suggestion. So let's dive in. With the new rules mandating engine capacity at 850cc, cylinder count at 4 and the maximum bore size restricted, do you think the next generation of MotoGP bikes can be considered pure prototypes? At least the current rules with their shape-shifting chassis and unfettered aero had significant engineering innovation. I see the point that the new rules are to slow the bikes down, but without opening the door to alternate engine configurations and thus alternative chassis designs within the 850cc cap, the real engineering diversity will be found in World Supersport, and can MotoGP survive that? Regarding the recent mantra that aero and shape-shifting is irrelevant for street bikes, so shouldn't be part of MotoGP, MotoGP also features seamless gearboxes, carbon brakes and pneumatic valve trains, none of which are relevant for street bikes. So maybe now is the time to permit electronic active suspension in MotoGP as it's well established in street bikes. Can MotoGP continue to ignore that? So the suggestion element here, Simon, is effectively active electronic suspension in MotoGP. What do you reckon?
I'm not opposed to it, although I have my slight concerns about it that it would turn into another case of ride-out devices, because it would allow you to basically alter the geometry of a bike in real time. It depends how it's done. There's some forms of racing where it makes a ton of sense, and I wish that it was allowed. I think it would be a huge benefit and would massively decrease speeds, lap speeds at the Isle of Man TT, for example, because the course is so different over the the duration of it.
That's a good point.
But I think that to go fully philosophical in Andrew's question, which his question is quite philosophical, so I feel like I can in my answer as well.
Always.
Essentially, it all depends on how we define prototype and whether or not you're hung up on it on the true sense of the word prototype, because nothing is a prototype in racing. There are always rules. I don't think there's any class in racing where the rule book says you need to bring a vehicle with 4 wheels or 2 wheels, good luck with all the rest. Everything is limited in some way in every form of racing, regardless of what that racing series is. I think that the new rules aren't really any more restrictive than the old rules, the current rules, for example. I don't think they're really any more restrictive than the rule book before that, which, essentially, the rule book before that allowed production bikes in a prototype class in the form of the CRTs, and we were okay with that. So, yeah, I'm not hung up on what a prototype is. I'm not too bothered about the definition of it, as long as, and I think this is the most important thing, and it's what we're going to see anywhere, as long as they're still the fastest motorbikes in the world. And they will continue to be the fastest motorbikes in the world, because all the benefits that they are allowed means they'll still continue to be faster than superbikes. Plus, whenever you look at the way the superbike market is going, it looks pretty obvious like they're going to be slowed down as well. So, that's my kind of philosophical, technical answer.
A lot of you sent in suggestions, and one of them was Jamie Wilkins, who started with "Hello chaps" and had a lot of suggestions which covered off commentary, which covered off what to do when riders slap each other in gravel traps, which we've seen a little bit lately. But the suggestion Val wanted to comment on from Jamie was a highlights package. In Jamie's words, €200 per year for video pass and no race highlights. I don't always have time to watch Moto 2 and Moto 3, but if there were 10-minute highlights, I absolutely would. Heck, I'd even watch Moto E. I have some hope that Liberty will fix this, given the excellent, free, concise F1 highlights available on YouTube. What do you reckon, Val?
I mean, I think part of it's going to be what is in the pay TV contracts with the various broadcasters. So it's not always a question of what the series is willing to put out there, and what it can put out there is sometimes the question. But no, I absolutely agree. The reason this resonated with me is my impression, sort of my experience is this particular time of year right now, what I do every morning basically is I wake up, I pull up YouTube before anything else, and I watch a 10-minute highlight reel of an NBA playoff game. That's what I do. That's a huge, massive part of my routine. I can't watch those games live. It's, time-wise not accessible to me. So for one reason or another, Moto 2, Moto 3, Moto E, they will all be in that same sort of boat. MotoGP does upload some of that to YouTube, but I think the Le Mans offering for Moto 2, Moto 3 looked like a combined 5-minute package, which isn't necessarily enough. But it's a wider question of, the footage is still a commodity. Yes, absolutely. And it's still your product. You have to protect it. You have to earn as much off of it as you can. But increasingly we're in a sporting sort of situation where the footage of the big moments just has to be available on demand, extremely easy, just at the click of your fingertips, basically. That's not something you can trade on so much anymore, because it's something that you need to spread organically and for people to talk about, because otherwise you're gating yourself and you're gating your sport and how much people can talk about it. Again, it's, NBA can come up again, but every big thing that has happened in an NBA game or whatever, it'll be all over YouTube and Twitter immediately. They're not hiding it from anybody. You have to pay to see the full games, but otherwise it's there. And that's why it's massive. And, MotoGP can be a lot more fun to watch than the NBA, but sorry, NBA. I don't know why I said that. But yeah, you see where I'm going with this.
I think this change has come in. And it actually goes back to the NBA, believe it or not, because it goes back to something that Dan Rossamondo said whenever he came on the podcast December with us, Dorna's new chief commercial officer. And, well, he's not new anymore. He's been there a year, but, he's still new. I think he made the point that once the race is over, within 24 hours of the race being over, it's no longer content, it's marketing. And that has to be the mentality that MotoGP adopts. Once your race is finished, and once the people who've paid to watch it live have been satisfied that they got to see the whole thing live, the whole purpose of that race is to convert new people who didn't watch it live to watch the next one live.
Yeah.
And we should be doing that by just pumping out highlights. We should be showing every single moment of every race once it's happened, and we should be doing it free on social media, not behind a paywall, not behind a sign up to our website mailing list in order to see this on here. You should just be pumping it into people's brains.
And I would say on that front, don't worry too much about spoiler alerts as well, because I'm making that even a priority, because it's 2024 and this is just how things are now. And Simon's shaking his head at me on that.
There is no such thing as spoilers in live events. Spoilers are for Hollywood movies. They're not for things that are happening live involving real people.
I think spoiler alerts in an era of having to wait for something on a BBC highlights package later was a thing. But then your only spoiler alert potential there was like someone mentioning it to you in the street. Social media wasn't a thing.
Yes.
If I'm like catching up on, rarely MotoGP legs, I've got a podcast to present. But say I've missed part of the weekend, I just resign myself to the fact I'm going to find out what happened as soon as I clock onto Slack and see what you two are talking about. I'm not going to have the privilege of watching it as live if I haven't watched it live, but that's going down a completely different tangent. Go on, Val.
No, to be fair, regarding spoiler alerts, I think the only note for me there is don't worry about it, but also give people who specifically have stayed off their phone and ignored everything and have been working or something, give them a very clear way of catching up on the race without having the result front and center.
Yes.
That's basically it, which MotoGP does do. It does have that option on the website, so no, fair game there.
Yeah, that's a very good shout. I think the instruction should be stay in a cave until 9 p.m. or whenever you're free. Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay, another philosophical one. I'm going to read the whole of this because it's glorious. This is from Norman. Norman Dame. Sorry, Norman. I've probably mispronounced you twice there. But he says, "Hi, guys. This is Norman from the United States. Great podcast. I've been listening for years. I've never missed one, which is very much appreciated because there's a lot." We had another listener who made some suggestions for conversation topics rather than suggestions to change MotoGP, who said they'd re-listened to our entire archive right back to 2020, I guess, while repainting their house, which... maybe think about the size of their house and how many hours of painting that was. But anyway, we'll get on to some of their suggestions in another episode. But so back to Norman from the United States. I'd like to see anything that assists the rider in making decisions removed from the motorcycle. It's motorsport, and I believe that the symbiosis between man and machine should be 50-50. Traction control and other computer devices that make decisions to alter the bike's behaviour corner to corner and track to track should be removed so that the rider has to make decisions about getting the most out of the motorcycle. And this is where Norman's email gets really good, because there's a glorious comparison here. If I may give an analogy, if we were to go to watch a guitar virtuoso perform live, would we be as impressed to know that their guitar has special electronics to correct for their incorrect note selection or timing? I know that I'm not interested in hearing computer-perfected music. I want to hear the human soul in it. I feel the same about motorcycle racing. The machines can be as advanced as they can be, so that the engineers can also have a vested interest in the sport, but it should not come at the expense of the rider's decision-making and inputs to control the machine. I would like to see men and women racing each other, not computers racing each other. Val, where do you stand on this?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, it's a familiar topic, obviously, in basically every type of motorsport right now, but it's very well put. I'm gonna counter with also a music type thing, right? And yeah, when you're going to a concert and hearing a virtuoso guitarist like, I don't know, Stevie Ray Vaughan or something, I guess. Yeah, you want to see the skill, right? You want to feel that this is somebody at the top of their game, completely unfettered and unaided, and certainly it's a live recording playing and there's nothing helping them. It's just, man and machine, and the machine is as simple as that machine can be, absolutely. But most of us do still listen to studio recorded music, right? I mean, that's the primary thing, it feels like right now. And in studios, they overlay, they, correct mistakes, obviously. They stitch things together, they add a bunch of reverb, and it's still recognizably music, and the product you still get is entertainment. Like, I don't get mad at the new Billie Eilish single because it doesn't sound like that live. It's, it's just what it is. And for me, it's a spectrum in terms of how much rider assistance there is, because if you're on the very far side of that spectrum, what you just would want is a rider showing up to the track with a bike with maybe one mechanic and just doing the race. No, because for me there is no meaningful difference for me between a rider being assisted when they're on the bike and when they're off the bike. Like, if they're all alone and unaided, whatever, on the bike, but then off the bike they have 1,500 people pouring through every megabyte of the data, for me that makes no difference. I mean, that's the same type of thing. You're already not really alone and unaided, and it's a machine. This is not the 100 meters, this is not high jump, it's not necessarily a celebration of pure human athleticism or the achievements of the human body. It is ultimately a show, a contest involving the teams, of which the teams are part of. I'm fine with riders being helped a bit, because it's not like they're all hitting the same lap time. They're very close, but still, the best of the best within this range they're still winning. They're not being like coached through corner to corner, but honestly, even if they were, I wouldn't care, because I imagine myself on that bike immediately. And I know I could never do any of that. I know it. I see it. So it doesn't bother me, because clearly some of them are also better than the others. But I completely and totally understand the impulse. It's just I wanted to show where I come from on this side of the debate.
So I have 3 points here. Firstly, Val, if you want to see one rider with one mechanic and one motorbike, as someone that's just come from the first test of the new Women's World Championship, make sure and watch it, because that is basically what it is. It is properly grassroots racing, which is quite nice. Secondly, I think Norman's question might actually have been written by Casey Stoner in disguise.
Exactly.
It's Casey's exact belief on where MotoGP should be right now. And thirdly, unsurprisingly, I do disagree with Val to an extent, in that I think that all the electronics that we have, I think it's gone a bit too far, in that I don't want to get rid of them, but I do agree with Casey's logic in that an anti-wheelie software should be there to prevent the rider from flipping over the back of the bike whenever he accidentally gives it too much gas and causing a crash and hurting himself. It shouldn't be there so that a rider can come out of a corner, accelerate fully, and make sure that the electronics do all the rest. I do get that there needs to be an element of rider skill, and we're not starting to lose it, but it could be lost very easily. It could go away. And it's not just electronics, because things like the ride height devices and the wings all contribute to that as well, to use the wheelie example. So I would like to see it dialed back a little bit to the point where it becomes a safety feature again, rather than another tool to go even faster. But we definitely can't get rid of it, because if we got rid of it, then 350 brake horsepower motorbikes would be utterly unrideable. Like, it can't go away, because it would just turn into an absolute disaster.
Yeah, I'm totally sympathetic to that. I guess I just don't mind. There is a limit for me, too. Like, again, going back to the music thing, I would not listen to AI-generated music, for instance. That's a step too far. So always there's a step too far, I think, for everybody.
Where do you stand on auto-tune? Because that's basically what we're arguing here, isn't it?
It's fine, but it just sucks. It just sucks to listen to. It always sounds terrible.
Yeah. I guess that's the worry, isn't it? That we end up with auto-tune music that all sounds a bit similar and a bit the same.
Yeah.
And it's introducing that human element to an extent. So there's I think there's a point where we all agree somewhere in between all our various points.
Do we want to do the rest of this podcast about music, or?
Let's see if we can. Just looking down the question list, I don't think you're going to get many more music analogies in there, but let's see how we get on. One for you next, Val. This is from Boris from London, who says he's better known as Evil Chicken. I'm not sure if that's a social media handle, a nickname among friends, or Boris is literally some kind of demonic poultry. But his question is, or his suggestion, rather, 2 podcasts ago, you touched on racing back in the jungle, which is the kind of affectionate-ish name from riders for the midfield. If the cameras are there and can record the racing, just edit the footage and make another program to run midweek. Basically focus on the midfield, focus on the jungle. It wouldn't need much build-up, an introduction, recap of teams and riders, and then straight into it. It would give riders and teams and sponsors further down some welcome exposure and show their team sponsor logos. It might even be raw footage with TV sports channels just putting out their own shows from it. Hope you like it. You guys could kick this idea around, says Boris. So yeah, Val, a midfield-only cut of MotoGP racing.
Yeah, I like it. That's the why I put my name down next to that one. I was like, I like that. That's a good idea. I mean, the only problem is the races to begin with, in particular, are so close to where even if the camera is there, there's only one thing it can follow, which is the lead battle. It can't swing back around quickly enough to capture basically anything else. And clearly, there is not a lot of interest in having 2 cameras per corner now, is there? But I like the idea. I think the idea is really good.
I mean, to go back to our initial podcast on this topic, this is yet another reason. I love this idea, by the way.
Yeah,
this is yet another reason why we should have multiple onboard cameras on every bike.
Yeah.
Because then you build a Japanese Cup highlights episode, basically to use the Japanese manufacturer's name for it. You build a highlights reel of their championship or the battle from 10th to the last, just using onboard action. Because that's doable if you have, multiple. If you had a shoulder camera, a forward facing, a rear facing, and a gyro camera on every bike, suddenly you could do that and build a fairly decent highlights package, especially with a bit of helicopter action and whatever. Wouldn't take much. So yeah, let's do that. That's a great idea.
And the riders have given it a snappy marketing name in the jungle already. So jungle highlights, that kind of thing. There's ways to market it. It'd be really nice to see a bit more of that. At times other than when Pedro Acosta's fallen into it somehow, which is the only time that area of the grid feels like it's getting on TV at the moment. And I know that the front of the field has been amazing in a lot of races this year. I get it. I understand you wouldn't switch to a great race for 14th when there's a just as good a one going on for first. But show us another time. There's so many ways to showcase things now.
For what it's worth, like just looking at MotoGP's YouTube right now, there is sort of a thing like that. It is 3 minutes long. It's a little bit limited in the footage available, basically, is how I would put it. But clearly there is at least some recognition that, yeah, we should.
I'm also going to find a way to bring it back to music and say that obviously you would have to license AC/DC's Welcome to the Jungle as the intro music to it, right?
AC/DC's Welcome to the Jungle? Or you're going to have to cut that. That is, of course, Guns N' Roses' Welcome to the Jungle.
Of course it's Guns N' Roses.
Of course it is. How dare you?
No, we're not going to cut that. Johnny, you have enough editing to do this episode anyway. You can leave that in.
How did I mix that up?
I mean, they're all like guitar-y people, aren't they? As well?
That's a thing to say.
Guitar-y people. Shots fired
Guitar-y
at Val.
people, yeah. Right, on to another voice note submission. This is Duncan from Glasgow.
Hi guys, Duncan from Glasgow here. My suggestion for improving MotoGP would be to allow the MotoGP teams to run Moto2 and Moto3 stars at official tests throughout the year to build up that experience on the bike and allow them to hit the ground running. Obviously guys like Pedro Acosta, they'd be even better, which is hard to imagine. But more in terms of other guys in the recent years that have maybe struggled with that initial adjustment, the likes of Ralph Fernandez, Remy Gardner, Iker Lecuona, just creating that pathway for riders to help them avoid situations like we've seen with some of those riders where they're only in the championship for 1 year. Keen to know your thoughts, and thanks as ever for all the great work. Cheers. Bye.
I love this idea. I actually think this kind of thing works pretty well in other forms of motorsport. I think F1 has got really quite good now at mandating that its teams run young rookie drivers in official practice sessions. It's had rookie tests. Formula E does a really good job of rookie tests as well. Val was at one recently. So to me, at the moment, there's a weird disparity where a rider coming up from Moto2 doesn't really get the best sort of grounding. A lot of them don't have the same sort of relationships with MotoGP teams that you see F1 teams having with F2 and F3 drivers. I think that MotoGP's got so much right about its ladder structure, apart from that little relationship at the end to get the top Moto2 riders onto MotoGP bikes more often. So to me, Duncan's got it absolutely right here. What do you reckon, Simon?
I love it as well. The only thing I'd change about Duncan's idea is we could kill two birds with one stone here. Let rookie riders from Moto2 and Moto3 test MotoGP bikes, but only allow them to do it on development Michelin tires.
That's fun.
So Michelin get new track, Michelin get data as well, and it's the best of both worlds because these guys are getting to try out the tires that they will use in the future. Michelin get data, teams get data. It doesn't use, it doesn't really benefit the teams in the same way as testing with, say, the race riders does, which is, one of the concession things. Absolutely. Do 3 or 4 days a year on a Monday. Allow them to recruit whoever they want from Moto2 and Moto3, because we were talking about this last night. I had dinner last night with Xavi Simeon, and we were talking about who Gas are going to end up with next year, and we both agreed that David Alonso wouldn't be an insane bet. Yeah. Take him straight from Moto3 because of how well he's performing, but you'd like to see him in a MotoGP bike first. So why not have a rookies test? Let him have a go, see what it's like. Absolutely.
Yeah. I agree completely. In terms of, I think F1 does do its Pirelli test, but it is usually I think race drivers or experienced test drivers, because it's a question of feedback also, not just data. And feedback wise, obviously MotoGP rookie is going to be a bit limited in that, but nobody's running those tires anyway, so you might as well have somebody who will ride a MotoGP bike, no questions asked.
Yes, yeah, that's on the thing. Those tires. Not just taking running away from experienced riders who want to do it. It's just not happening at the moment. So let some kids do it.
I think it is crazy that legitimately for most rookie signings, the teams see them on a MotoGP bike is 4 or 5 months after they've been signed. And you show up to Valencia and then you find out, are they actually any good with this type of machine, with our specific machine? Do they fit? There's no way for us to know because we don't hold rookie tests. Okay, Fabio Quartararo did happen, right? They put him on the Yamaha and immediately he's like, actually, this guy everybody forgot about is insanely good. Insanely good, gels with the bike fantastically. How many Fabio Quartararos did MotoGP miss out on in some way? how many riders were there waiting for the opportunity to get their perfect bike, and how many teams maybe thought, oh, this guy might be good for our bike, but there's no way for us to check without signing them up, and we won't do it. Yeah, absolutely, we need it. I think we need it.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think I can recall 3 MotoGP rookies who've got to ride a MotoGP bike before they graduated to MotoGP.
Alex
Marquez, Pecco Bagnaia rode the Aspar bike for a few laps. And Zarco tested for Suzuki before he signed for Tech 3 Yamaha.
Because Suzuki
won. Yeah. So 3 times out of all of the MotoGP rookies that I can ever remember, they've had a chance to try a MotoGP bike first. I mean, it's crazy, really, when you think about it.
Just thinking, though, with the current situation with concessions, what is stopping some of the manufacturers with more mileage to run just picking some Moto2 riders and just assessing them for the future? There's no reason not to, is there?
Precedence. The fact that it's not done, I think, is the only reason, really.
That is crazy to me because, again, did nobody see the Fabio Quartararo thing? Did it not teach anybody anything? Yamaha picked out a rider who everybody called a mediocre Moto2 rider, like specifically using that word. Maybe it's a bit harsh, whatever. He randomly fell into its lap, and it was back to world championship status a few years after, specifically because of that. Like, specifically, that's what made it. And does nobody care? Does nobody want that for their program?
British Superbikes crops up again now. This is from Todd Bryant, who emails to say, "Afternoon, gents. Love the pod. Thank you. Thank you, Todd. An idea I had to improve the format is something to do in British Superbikes. In the sprint race, there should be a live qualifying session going on. So effectively, the grid comes from the lap times you set. The grid for the Grand Prix comes from the lap times you set in the sprint race. Todd gives the example of how the Le Mans weekend would have turned out. So Marc Marquez would have been able to correct his poor qualifying by using a sprint race lap times to set the Grand Prix grid. And what Todd adds, what you often see in British Superbikes is that when someone gets off at the front, they might not be on the front row for the race they qualify for with that one, because they win the race with consistent lap times, whereas the chasing pack tend to make the big push that brings the fast laps. He says it means someone near the back could bite the screen for a lap and get themselves on the front of the grid for the next race. He also adds that he doesn't think sprint results should ever form the Grand Prix grid because it easily ruin lots of races. He gives the example that at Jerez, Marc Marquez would have been near the back, Pecco Bagnaia would have been in the back for the Grand Prix at Le Mans. But he says a lap time grid would be great, in my opinion. This feels like the sort of thing that Val might have simulated. He put his name down for this one.
Well, I didn't simulate it. I've just seen it a lot in junior four-wheel racing.
Yes, true.
As a format that's used a lot in those multi-race weekends. I've got a couple of issues with it. The first one is, okay, a bad sprint race result ruins it, but also if you crash on lap 3, I mean, that also messes up your grid position anyway.
Yeah. Because
you didn't get enough running to set a normal representative lap time. You've been in the pack and then you fell down. You're starting at the back. Even if you were, say, like starting 4th for that sprint race and you fell down, it might encourage a bit of sprint conservatism, but actually might not be a bad thing. I'm not sure how I feel about that. The other one is, and this is the bigger one for me, in junior racing when they do that next race that the grid is formed for isn't more important.
That's very
Doesn't
true.
usually award more points. It usually awards the same amount of points. I'm not so easy about the idea of a Grand Prix race grid being formed by something slightly random. It's not totally random, but it is slightly random. It's so dependent on the race situation. It's so dependent on all that kind of stuff, and whether you're in traffic or not. It's so dependent on whether you're an Ea Bastianini.
You get a lot of Bastianini poles out of this scenario, can you?
Yes, absolutely. And I like it. There's something about it that does work for me a little bit, but I think not enough to where I would commit to it.
I straight up don't like it. I'm sorry, Todd. I straight up don't like it. I think what it would end up doing is essentially rewarding the guys who are already fast by giving them a chance to have an even better, it would correct the mistakes, but it would also let the fastest guys be faster, and I think it would make racing a bit duller. I mean, Mark coming from P13 to the podium last weekend in Le Mans was pretty spectacular, and that probably wouldn't have happened. I think that if we were more focused, which we are going forward with the new rules, on making racing better and making it a bit easier to pass again, then it would be less of an issue anyway. So I hope we go down that route instead. I much prefer that.
I see the appeal of having two different grids. That's
Yes,
the part of
yeah.
it. Is just having, you look at the start of the race and you should be able to tell immediately whether it's a sprint or the main race. And right now we don't really have that because they line up in the same order.
Maybe what we should do is we should set the sprint race grid based on Friday's Q0
Yes,
end of.
I think that's good. I think that's really good. Yes.
My misgiving with that, though, I agree. When this format was announced, I was like, same grid for sprint and Grand Prix. I don't like that. No, why don't I like that? Why does it actually matter? Part of that was just like me being a little bit nerdy about it and thinking they should be different for the sake of different. And part of me was thinking, well, could that be the same race twice? Because it's not like pit stops are going to feature in one. It's not like the tyres are going to be radically different. It's just one race is short and the other from the same grid. How often, since we started sprint racing, has the sprint and the Grand Prix basically been identical? Barely ever, I would say. The storylines are always distinct enough. So I've come to the conclusion it just doesn't matter that the grids are both the same. I don't really care. Although the nerdy part of me, who spent time as a kid thinking up alternative qualifying sessions for motorsport series as a genuine pastime rather than drinking with my friends, would love this idea. But I've also, this will be a debut on the podcast, I think, for anecdotes from the British Touring Car Championship 27 years ago. But I think I first saw this being tried in the BTCC on the weekend of Diana, Princess of Wales's funeral, when they didn't do any racing out. They didn't do any track sessions out of respect on the Saturday. So they had two races, and their grid for race 2 was set by fastest laps from race 1. And it really wrecked race 1 because so many people were just pitting. If they weren't like top 3 or whatever, they pitted, put on new tyres, made it a qualifying session. It did mix up the grid for race 2, if I remember rightly, because there were a few midfield teams really made the most of that chance. But it made race 1 a bit of a messy non-spectacle, apart from like the handful of cars at the front who just stuck with their result and didn't pit.
One thing that you do tend to see in BSB occasionally is that people who've crashed out of the race get permission from the marshals. Because it's not a complete, like we talked about earlier, it's not a complete, if the bike touches the ground, you're out. If you get permission from the marshals and there's no fluids or anything, you can ride back to the pits. So what you occasionally see is someone crash out, ride back to the pits, come out, a minute down in the rest of the grid and qualify on pole.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, don't want that.
Exactly.
That's silly.
Not keen on that. Gabby Benales, or Sober Gabs, has emailed this suggestion. Gabby also wants a documentary about the midfield, or basically more attention to the guys in the back, maybe a documentary about the midfield riders. I think we're quite keen on that. I think that's the kind of extension of the plan for Jungle Highlights. Yeah. And
viewership figures in the single digits, but we'll be among them.
There's 3. There's 4. Gabby as well. There's 4 people up for that.
Exactly.
Probably most listeners to this podcast would watch it as well, in fairness. And there's a decent few
and
thousand.
And the mums of everyone who's 10th to 24th in MotoGP. This is another 12.
So okay, we're all up for that. And if the MotoGP equivalent of Drive Survive had been done well, it probably the function does a bit of that, because F1's Drive Survive does head for midfield storylines too. But Gabby's other suggestion: I'm from Los Angeles, California. A change that I know a lot of us in America would love to see is more races on this side of the world. A Grand Prix in Las Vegas would be amazing. Who doesn't want to visit Las Vegas? Fans would be traveling to a very popular city with millions of things to do after a day full of MotoGP. It just sounds so enticing. If Liberty Media wants to grow the American fan base, they have to have more races out here. So Simon, more races in America, specifically MotoGP in Las Vegas.
I mean, obviously yes. The answer is obviously yes. The fundamental problem with that is a lack of places to have them. America does not have a great depth of homologated motorcycle friendly circuits. We have Circuit of the Americas. We probably have Indianapolis if we made some modifications to it to be able to go back there. Although I think that might be quite difficult given how much the bikes have gotten faster since we last went there. I mean, Laguna Seca is unfortunately forevermore essentially gone from the calendar because it's just not safe enough, and it's owned by some rather belligerent neighbours who have no intention of doing anything to make it bigger or safer because they seem to hate it. And we have a new circuit being built in Tennessee, Flat Rock, which hopefully has potential, but it's a few years away. And then there's just nothing else. That's the problem. Not without, real substantial investment. What we have seen, obviously, is Liberty are willing to invest because the pits complex of the new circuit in Las Vegas is owned by them. They promote the race, which is super unusual in terms of basically motorsport. I can't think of another example where a championship owns a circuit at that level, apart from British Superbikes and MSV. They own half the tracks there, but that was kind of fortuitous rather than designed. The two grew organically. They didn't come together as one. So until someone starts building circuits in the US that we can go to and hope, maybe it is Liberty, maybe it's not, maybe it comes naturally as the sport grows, then we're kind of stuck. But it's crazy that there's not more races in the US because, I people in Europe fail to comprehend the size of America, I think, sometimes. We drove from Seattle to a friend's house in Montana whenever we were there for the race earlier this year, and we came out of Seattle and my GPS said turn left in 1,000 kilometers. And there's one race there for 360 million people spread across 3,500 kilometers, 3,500 miles. It's a huge place and it deserves more races. I just wish there was places we could go and have them.
Yeah, specifically to the Vegas suggestion, obviously, F1 does race in Vegas, but you put MotoGP bikes on that track, people will die. It's as simple as that. But the whole appeal of that track is that it runs through the Vegas Strip. It runs in Vegas. You can't really do that with a permanent circuit, but MotoGP needs a permanent circuit. So, and also, let's not send everybody to Vegas, I guess. That's also part of it. There's other interesting bits in America. But I know, we need more races, yeah.
I guess the Vegas F1 comparison is quite good because we have got Liberty about to get involved in MotoGP if it all goes through, and Vegas is kind of the ultimate example of Liberty going, F1 needs this thing. What's the biggest, boldest, most hit every mark way we could do it? We'll make it happen ourselves. We're not going to look for outside help with this. I'm sure they'd love some more outside help and money, but they've just absolutely gone for it with Vegas, promoted it themselves, and it was one of the best races of last season. A little bit mixed reports from those on the ground in terms of the experience there and working there and stuff, but overall, I'd say a big success for F1. I think it'd be an interesting test of Liberty's willingness to really, really get behind MotoGP if there are other examples of it going, MotoGP needs this, let's make that thing happen ourselves. That's something that Liberty will have to prove if and when it's in charge of what happens here. And again, on the American races question, as a very small kind of barometer of that, I haven't checked geo split for listeners for a bit, but whenever we do a questions or suggestions episode, there are so many from America, and the fans who message us are so engaged. There's so much loyalty. I think I say it every time we mention anything to do with America, or every time we do a questions or suggestions episode. The American fan base, considering it's been a long time since they've had a homegrown rider being successful, and it's a long time since they had multiple races over there, they're so loyal, and they deserve a little bit more back. Now, Trackhouse is a start. Let's get Trackhouse nearer the front with some high profile riders. Let's get more races in America. You lot deserve it. We're going to finish with what I'm titling the Chris from Belfast section, because this is incredible. Chris, I said a few people sent multiple suggestions. I feel like Chris sent his from a pub. There's an absolutely amazing array here, and they vary from the completely off the wall to some that just show such passion for motorcycles and motorcycle racing. I absolutely love it. There's things that range from let's bin all the rules and just have a maximum top speed and a weight limit. Let's do laps in the wrong direction. There's have sprinkler systems. There's something about naked races with no fairings on the bikes. I just think Fabio Quartararo might take that a little bit too seriously. But you guys have picked a few of Chris's many suggestions to jump on. So I'm going to start with this one. For some races, says Chris in Belfast, do double the laps or some sort of team race. Do away with sprint races. One teammate does the first half and the other person does the second half. And then split the points between them. Val, what do you reckon to that one?
Look, I love it. We cannot do this, obviously. I love it. We absolutely cannot do this. Imagine if Jorge Martin loses the 2024 title because Franco Morbidelli crashed out in the second leg of the race. Can't have it. It's impossible. It would be awesome. Honestly, I would be super into it. Like the idea of making them also ride the same bike, probably not simultaneously, but just come into the pits for an endurance style switch over. That's heavily regulated in terms of time. We can't do it. Sounds hilarious and super fun, but it's too much of a weird gimmick. And
I think the FM Endurance World Championship would also have things to say about it if MotoGP started bringing in endurance style racing. I'd rather we just like made all of the factories send their factory riders to go do Suzuki at hour every year. That'd be far more entertaining.
It's 8 hours. Who has 8 hours?
Like they used to, you know.
I'm kidding.
Who has 8 hours? I'm not a fan. Like at heart, I'm not a fan of endurance racing. I get it as a concept. I like the thought of it on paper, both cars and bikes. But my first motorsport experiences were rallycross. I'm not long things. I've got 2 kids now. I've got even less time. So yeah, I always find endurance racing something noble as a concept, but I'm not sure I'd sit down to watch much of it. But format variety, I love. F1 talks a lot about format variety as well, and what comes out again and again is, got such a long calendar now, why should all races be the same? And it feels like that's been talked about for years, and yet all races are still broadly the same in F1. Some have sprints, MotoGP, they all have sprints. We can go further, we can vary lengths. I've just like semi-slated endurance racing is not my bag, but I don't mind the idea of like one round a year being a 2-rider enduro. Just yeah, why not? The next one on Chris from Belfast's list is night races. Simon, you wanted to jump in on this one.
Oh, absolutely. We should do more of them. We should absolutely do more of them. I dislike the Qatar's the only one we do. The double benefit of them is that they look spectacular. They're a great evening's entertainment, and they work really well for overseas races in terms of time zones. So make Sepang a night race, make Phillip Island, maybe not Phillip Island, but we should have a night race in Australia, which could actually be done at Eastern Creek, what is now Sydney Motorsport Park, but used to be the Grand Prix venue. It's floodlit.
It is, isn't it? Yeah.
It's got floodlights.
Nice track
so a beautiful track. Make those races evening races so that they still go out at prime time in Europe, but you get this, great nighttime atmosphere at the event. Why not? It would be something different. And the thing is, we have the technology. We know we can do it. We've proven with Qatar that it's fairly seamless to do. So, I'd love to see a bit more of it. World Superbikes this year have had a fantastic idea and are actually doing the World Superbike races at Portimao as a dusk race. So they don't need floodlights, but it'll be as the sun sets and should look fantastic, which is a great idea. Let's see more of that. I'm all up for experimenting with the time of the day at which we race.
Yeah, I'd go with that, especially for the benefit of the international audience, doing a few favours for people who have to get up at some very odd hours to see the massive European stint. Yeah. I'm all for that. F1 comparison number 507 from this podcast. Sorry, MotoGP only fans, but it's a negative F1 comparison, so you might appreciate this. I think F1's gone too far with night races now. They've kind of lost their special appeal. Like when Singapore was the first one, that was really exciting, that was great, and now it's like I've kind of lost track of which one's night and which one isn't really. And I always feel like there's a point in the year where I suddenly go, I haven't seen an F1 car in daylight in a picture for about 3 months because we've had a run of whatever it is, Vegas followed by Abu Dhabi or something like that, where it's been a long stint of mostly floodlit racing, and they don't feel. The novelty value's gone, and it's beyond that. It's like you don't even notice whether it's day or night and whether it's special or not anymore. Maybe that doesn't matter. Maybe getting the time zone mix more appealing for audiences around the world is actually what does matter, and maybe the on-site atmosphere at a night race is the bit that really does matter. But I think you can have too much of a good thing on that front. And the final one of this episode from the Chris from Belfast selection: extra points for doing the most overtaking and extra points for setting the highest top speed. Val?
Nah to both of those. Nah to extra points for the most overtaking, because that just rewards people who qualify badly, and there's no real reason to that. It punishes people who qualify well, I would say, which, I'm not into. I've seen series that do it, but they usually do it in like reverse grid races. If you're going to introduce a reverse grid format some weekends, then yeah, by all means. But as a straight grid format, no. And in terms of top speed, oh gosh, we do not need to give them any more incentive to go quicker in a straight. Absolutely not. I do not want to see them hit 370 because they can, and then just not brake for turn one. No, I'd rather not.
I'm generally completely opposed to extra points for anything, and I am in this case as well. However, if there was €1 million cash prize for the most overtakes in the season, that is something I could absolutely get behind. even if it was a BMW, the same as the fastest pole sitter over the season, throw in a prize to the most overtakes, which is actually Triumph do it in Moto 2, where the winner gets a Triumph, gets a street bike. So do something like that and, make a bit of a spectacle of it. It's another thing that we could be talking about, another thing to keep an eye on. And it would be awesome if you got to the last round of the season and there was like two guys with the same number of overtakes and a BMW on the line, and the two of them just passing each other on every lap to be the one that got the last overtake in to score the award. Let's do something. Yeah, let's do something crazy like that. Why not?
The two of them pretend crashing in Q1 to end up on the last
to
row
make sure they're at the back of the grid.
Yeah. As a comment, I agree. Extra points or anything? No, I'm not. I can't. Maybe that's just me not being able to cope with mental maths anymore. I feel like there's a point in my teens and 20s when I knew every championship scoring system off by heart and could calculate things in my head really easily. And now it's like, everything's got multi-race formats and bonus points for things. Dropped scores. I mean, that's more something I remember from covering club racing when dropped scores were a big thing I couldn't get my head around. Basically, I'm now too old for varied bonus point systems. Please don't do it to me. But yeah, I think MotoGP does quite well with the BMW M Award. I'm not sure how much any of these guys need a BMW, but having something that kind of celebrates qualifying as an interesting aside and the achievements in themselves, just as a little extra end of season talking point where you're not giving too much importance to it, because ultimately qualifying is important because it sets up the race. Top speed's important because if you've got a good top speed, you're probably going quite well in the race. Overtaking's important because if you're overtaking people, you're getting nearer the front. So there's enough like natural success reasons to celebrate these things, but a few extra like bits of cash, random prizes, little sideshows to talk about. I'd rather that than bonus points. But yeah, so I don't think we dismissed all of Chris's suggestions of the many. I think there's a definite thumbs up from a few of us for some degree of format variety. But gosh, thank you so much, listeners, for the amazing array of not just suggestions for future MotoGP rules, but kind comments about the podcast. They're really, really appreciated. We really enjoy doing this, and it's even more enjoyable knowing that you're having fun listening to us as well. So that is hugely appreciated. And talking point suggestions, lots and lots of talking point suggestions, which we will bear in mind for future episodes as well. Quite a lot of stewarding related ones. I think we might mention that again. Just a hunch. Two back-to-back races before our first impromptu summer break coming up. We've got Barcelona followed straight away by Mugello. I'm going to spring an unplanned one-sentence challenge on these guys to finish the episode. Who will be leading the championship after this double header? And what rider market thing do you think will have happened within the next fortnight after Barcelona and Mugello? Could be an actual announcement, could be a deal done. Simon, you go first.
Paco Bagnaia will be leading the championship, and because Jorge Martin isn't going to finish on Sunday in Barcelona because the team have announced that they're running a special livery, which is obviously a curse. And the Ducati will have announced who his 2025 teammate will be.
Who's it going to be?
Oh, no, that's not what you asked.
No, but I'm asking now.
Jorge Martin.
It's not like...
It's going to be Jorge Martin.
Excellent. It's not like this podcast has a written accessible rule book that people can hold us to. I don't feel I have to explain decisions. Val, who will be leading the championship after Mugello?
Well, Jorge Martin will be leading the championship after Mugello. And, man, I'm going to... I don't know, Aprilia re-signs Maverick Vinales. I don't know.
The easy one, I reckon. Yeah, I think that might be. Well,
yeah, I'm afraid to make a call on Bagnaia's teammate. Simon trying to legalese himself out of it bought me some time to make a decision. I still didn't. So
I'm going to go with Jorge Martin still leading and with a increased championship lead. I've got faith that he's stabilising now. And as for rider market decision, I think Ducati has to happen next, doesn't it, before anything else can happen. I'm going to be a little bit boring and stick with Simon's bet and go, I think they'll have decided that they have to go for Martin because he's too quick to risk having on a different bike. And there's too many complications in persuading Marc Marquez to do it, even if Marquez might be the more marketable solution. I think Marquez is going to be happy enough where he is if he gets a top spec bike, and you don't have to solve the sponsor clash or whatever. Anyway, join us after Barcelona this weekend to see how many of our predictions have gone wrong already, and then after Mugello the week after to find that we're wrong about all of those things. Thank you for your suggestions. Thank you for your company, as always, and I'll be back in your ears after Barcelona.
The Athletic.